here for my 2018 Victober TBR. I can't wait to tell you all of the books that I am hoping to read. But before I dive into those, I wanted to let you know that as I did last year, I have created a Victober TBR playlist on my channel. So you can just go to the playlist section and I have the 2018 TBRs all in a nice playlist for maybe some that you've missed and maybe get some more TBR ideas or just find some great channels that you didn't know about before this. So I will be switching things up a little bit in this TBR. In the books that I have physical copies of, I will be reading the first sentence of it just to give you a little sampling of the writing and maybe entice you to pick that book up as well. So first of all are the challenge books. And the first one is to my challenge, and it was to read a Victorian novel with a proper noun in the title. And I picked for this John Halifax, A Gentleman by Dinah Mulock-Craik. This was on my TBR last year and I sadly neglected to get to it. So I definitely want to get to it this year because Dinah Mulock-Craik is a Victorian author that's not really talked about as much. And I really do want to investigate her writing further. This is the type of plot that Victorians loved. It's a life story. And so I think there's going to be a fair amount of trials and tribulations, but also some triumphs in this. And I'm looking forward to checking out a new Victorian author to me. The next challenge was Lucy's challenge to read a Victorian novel written anonymously or under a pseudonym, and that is Mary Barton by Elizabeth Gaskell, which she published anonymously. It was her first novel. There are some fields near Manchester, well known to the inhabitants as Green Hayes Fields, through which runs a public footpath to a little village about 2 miles distant. In spite of these fields being flat and low, nay, in spite of the want of wood, the great and usual recommendation of level tracts of land, there is a charm about them which strikes even the inhabitant of a mountainous district who sees and feels the effect of contrast in these commonplace but thoroughly rural fields, with the busy, bustling manufacturing town he left but half an hour ago. I do not know a whole lot about this book, but I'm really looking forward to reading it with Doris from All D Books, Bree Hill, Mel from Mel's Bookland Adventures, Katie from Life Between Words, Kate from the novel Nomad, and Adam from Memento Mori. You heard that right. I got Adam to agree to read a Victorian novel with all of us, and I'm so excited. I think basically, though, this does talk a lot about industrialization. It's set in Manchester, and you see all of this through the eyes of the working class, which is really different for a Victorian novel. I'm definitely looking forward to getting to this, and I think it will just be really great to have all of Elizabeth Gaskell's novels read, and I think I will be doing a video kind of how I feel about all of her novels, how I rank them, and looking forward to reading this final unread novel for me. The next challenge is to read, that's the general challenge, and it's to read a novel and watch the film adaptation of it. And I will be reading The Mayor of Casterbridge by Thomas Hardy. One evening of late summer, before the 19th century had reached 1/3 of its span, a young man and woman, the latter carrying a child, were approaching the large village of Weydon Priors in Upper Wessex on foot. They were plainly but not ill-clad, though the thick hoar of dust which had accumulated on their shoes and garments from an obviously long journey lent a disadvantageous shabbiness to their appearance just now. I have decided that I really do want to read all of Thomas Hardy's books, and this was the one that I picked to read next. I've heard it has a plot that has lots of twists and turns, but also has Thomas Hardy's beautiful and lyrical writing. I'm really looking forward to getting to this, and I think it is basically about a man who makes lots of big mistakes and then rises to prominence in this little community of Casterbridge as the mayor, and I'm really looking forward to watching the mini-series with Ciarán Hinds. The next challenge is to read a Victorian novel written by one of the host's favorite authors. This was Ange's challenge, and so I picked Katie's favorite author, Charles Dickens, and I will be getting to David Copperfield. Whether I shall turn out to be the hero of my own life, or whether that station will be held by anybody else, these pages must show. To begin my life with the beginning of my life, I record that I was born, as I have been informed and believe, on a Friday at 12 o'clock at night. It was remarked that the clock began to strike, and I began to cry simultaneously. The type of plot that this is one that Dickens really loves to use, and it is a life story. And so it starts out when David Copperfield is a child and then continues on with him until he is an older man. I'm definitely looking forward to getting to this, as I know amongst Dickens fans, I think it is higher ranked from what I hear. I know it's a little bit darker, and so I think that's perfect for Victober. So I'm definitely looking forward to getting to this one, and I will be pairing this with the audiobook, and I am planning on just doing a couple chapters each day, allowing an entire month to read this chunker, and I think that will be a great way to experience it. The next challenge is Katie's challenge to read a Victorian novel from the first and or last decade of the Victorian era, which is a fabulous way to sample all of the writing that there is from the era. So from the first decade, I am reading something that was written in 1847, and that is Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. 1801. I have just returned from a visit to my landlord, the solitary neighbor that I shall be troubled with. This is certainly a beautiful country. In all England, I do not believe that I could have fixed on a situation so completely removed from the stir of society. A perfect misanthropist's heaven, and Mr. Heathcliff and I are such a suitable pair to divide the desolation between us. A capital fellow. He little imagined how my heart warmed towards him when I beheld his black eyes withdraw so suspiciously under their brows as I rode up, and when his fingers sheltered themselves with a jealous resolution still further in his waistcoat as I announced my name. This will be a reread for me, but I think having the perspective this time that Katie from Books and Things advises, in that it is a revenge tale, not a romance, I will enjoy it even more. And I will be buddy reading this with Doris from All D Books and Katie from Katie's Book Nook. And I'm just looking forward to reading such a very Gothic read in this time, and I remember just being in awe of Emily Bronte's beautiful writing last time, and I can't wait to get to it again. Then for the second part of Katie's challenge, that it is optional to do both, but I wanted to do both, and this one was written in 1892, and I will do a little publisher recommendation after I tell you about this book, because I was very generously sent this for review. And this is Grania, The Story of an Island by Emily Lawless. I know that might not look like Grania, but I asked specifically from Leanne Rose how to pronounce it, and it is said Grania. A mild September afternoon, 30 years ago, in the middle of Galway Bay. Clouds over the whole expanse of sky, nowhere showing any immediate disposition to fall as rain, yet nowhere allowing the sky to appear decidedly, nowhere even becoming themselves decided, keeping everywhere a broad, indefinable wash of grayness, a gray so dim, uniform, and all-pervasive that it defied observation, floating and melting away into a dimly blotted horizon, a horizon which, whether at any given point to call sea or sky, land or water, it was all but impossible to decide. This is published by a really neat publisher called Victorian Secret Publishers, and I happened upon them when I was doing all of my research, and I wanted to know more about them, and they published kind of underrated Victorian novels. Emily Lawless was an Irish author, so that's another reason why I'm extra excited to get to this, kind of focusing maybe not just exclusively on English authors. And this is the story of Grania, and she is just living kind of, I think, an unsatisfied life on this really isolated Aran island. And I just can't wait to get to this. So thank you, Victorian Secret Publishers, for sending this to me. They have so many interesting titles on their website, so I will, of course, link them down below, and I can't wait to get to this. The next book on my list is East Lynne by Mrs. Ellen Henry Wood. In an easy chair of the spacious and handsome library of his townhouse sat William, Earl of Mount Severn. His hair was gray, the smoothness of his expansive brow was defaced by premature wrinkles, and his once attractive face bore the pale, unmistakable look of dissipation. One of his feet was cased in folds of linen, as it rested on the soft velvet ottoman, speaking of gout as plainly as any foot ever spoke yet. It would seem, to look at the man as he sat there, that he had grown old before his time, and so he had. His years were barely 49, yet in all, save years, he was an aged man. I have found in recent years that I absolutely eat up Victorian sensation novels, and East Lynne is a very iconic sensation novel, and I can't wait to read this with Katie from Books and Things. And I don't know too much about this. Ange from Beyond the Pages really talked it up and made me want to read it and said it has a little bit of everything as far as plot goes. So I absolutely can't wait to get to this and enjoy it and discuss it with Katie. Next on the list is A Burglary by Amy Dillwyn. It is about 9:30 on a fine night early in September, and the darkness is illuminated outside the front door of Mr. Reese's house. Lewin are alt by the flashing lamps of a couple of carriages that are waiting to convey that gentleman and his guests to a ball at the neighboring town of Cwm Ethan. So I do apologize to the Welsh viewers if I mispronounced things dreadfully there. But this is a Welsh classic published by Hano Classics, and they very generously last year sent me some books, and I really think it's great that they have a Welsh women's classics line. And this, from what I can tell, is set in a very small town, and there's a burglary in the town at the very beginning of the book that kind of sets off a big turn of events. I think it's supposed to have a fair amount of humor in it, which will be nice to add some variety to my reading this month, and I am really looking forward to getting to this. Next on the list is Clara Vaughan by R.D. Blackmore, and this is a book that I really have been looking forward to because I heard that when it came out, people thought it was actually written by Mary Elizabeth Braddon. I have also heard this referred to as one of the books that was sort of first in the detective genre. I think it is basically about someone's father going missing, Clara Vaughan's father, and she investigates, she takes it into her own hands. So already we have an interesting female character to read about, which is rarer in Victorian novels. So yes, definitely looking forward to this one and can't wait to get to it. Next on the list is The Small House at Allington by Anthony Trollope. Of course there was a great house at Allington. How otherwise should there have been a small house? Our story will, as its name imports, have its closest relations with those who lived in the less dignified domicile of the two. But it will have close relations also with the more dignified, and it may be well that I should, in the first instance, say a few words as to the great house and its owner. I am so looking forward to getting to this fifth in Anthony Trollope's Chronicles of Barsetshire, and I have just been delighting more and more as the series goes on with the books. So the fourth one in the series, Framley Parsonage, is now my favorite, and I know Katie from Books and Things said that this is her most beloved in the series, and I'm also definitely looking forward to reading this with Doris from All D Books, and we will be reading it over the course of the month because it is pretty substantial, and I am loving having it in this Penguin Black Classics edition because it is incredibly floppy. It also has a very charming map at the very beginning. So many things to make this a very charming read, and I can't wait to enjoy it with Doris. The next book that I am planning on getting to is The Trail of the Serpent by Mary Elizabeth Braddon. I don't suppose it rained harder in the good town of Slopperton on the Sloshy than it rained anywhere else, but it did rain. There was scarcely an umbrella in Slopperton that could hold its own against the rain that came pouring down that November afternoon, between the hours of 4 and 5. Every gutter in High Street, Slopperton, every gutter in Broad Street, which was of course the narrowest street, in New Street, which was by the same rule the oldest street, in East Street, West Street, Blue Dragon Street, and Windmill Street, every gutter in every one of those thoroughfares was a little Niagara, with a maelstrom at the corner down which small crafts as bits of orange peel, old boots and shoes, scraps of paper, and fragments of rag were absorbed, as better ships have been in the great northern whirlpool. I have talked up Lady Audley's Secret by Mary Elizabeth Braddon so much, but she is definitely an author that I want to read all of her books. So the next one that I am reading is The Trail of the Serpent. And I do think it's quite a shame that it's taken me an entire year to pick up another of her books. But nevertheless, I'm really looking forward to this, and especially as a buddy read with Mel from Mel's Bookland Adventures, Bree Hill, and Doris from All D Books, and Kate from the novel Nomad. So Kate and Bree read Lady Audley's Secret with me last year, and then I'm so excited to have just a really great group of ladies to read this with. And there is a foreword by Esther Waters, and I know that there is a murder mystery in this and a mute detective. And it's also called Exuberantly Campy. So I don't know what to think of this, but I know that I want to read all of Mary Elizabeth Braddon's books, and the reading comes easy in her books. So I think this will definitely be a big treat. Next on the list, a very hefty one. I will be taking the whole month to read, and that is Deerbrook by Harriet Martineau. Every town-bred person who travels in a rich country region knows what it is to see a neat white house planted in a pretty situation, in a shrubbery, or commanding a sunny common, or nestling between two hills, and to say to himself as the carriage sweeps past its gate, "I should like to live there. I could be very happy in that pretty place." Transient visions pass before his mind's eye of dewy summer mornings, when the shadows are long on the grass, and of bright autumn afternoons, when it would be luxury to saunter into the neighboring lanes, and of frosty winter days, when the sun shines in over the laurestinus at the window, while the fire burns with a different light from that which gives it in the dull parlors of the city. Last year, Ange from Beyond the Pages read this and enjoyed it so much that she made me want to pick up my own copy, and I have been saving it for Victober. I can't wait to get to this. It is the story of two sisters, and I have talked about, and I have a video coming out about how I just love female friendship in books, and particularly in Victorian novels, even though it is rarer. So I'm hoping this is another book to add to the female friendship Victorian novel list, and I think I'm really looking forward to it. It's just two sisters who move to a new town. There's lots of changes happening in their life, and so I think their relationship will be a big feature of the plot, and for that I'm definitely looking forward to it, but it is also rather big, so I'm taking the month to read it. Next is Zoe by Geraldine Jewsbury. On the 14th of June, the little town of Sutton in Warwickshire was thrown into a state of violent excitement by the news that the son of the old squire, who used to belong to the old manor house, was to have his own again, that he had married in foreign parts some grand lady, a princess at the very least according to some versions, that the king had written him a letter with his own hand begging him to come to England and making him welcome to the old house, and all the land that had been in the family for generations and generations. I first read The Half-Sisters by Geraldine Jewsbury, the very first Victober with Katie from Books and Things, and so I'm really looking forward to be buddy reading Zoe with her this year. And I don't know too much about this, although I think it is kind of about doomed love. I don't think Geraldine Jewsbury's books are very cheerful, but that is okay because it is Victorian, so I know, there's going to be a whole range of types of plots in those, and I'm looking forward to something that might kind of pull at my heartstrings more and might not end so well, but it's going to be really compellingly written by Geraldine Jewsbury. I just absolutely adored The Half-Sisters, so definitely looking forward to moving on to this one. Last year, I tried and failed miserably to read some of Emily Bronte's poetry, but I am such a poetry newbie that I have decided I need to take baby steps with this. So I have found on Spotify beautiful readings of her poetry. And so I think I'm just going to do a small collection and maybe do a poem every other day or every day, just depending on how big the collection is, and listen to it while reading it. And I think that will really help me to gain something from it because I do want to love poetry, and if anything can help me, I think it would be beautifully read poetry. So I have been advised by those who love poetry that reading it aloud can help one enjoy it more, and I'm definitely looking forward to trying that out. Next is Esther Waters by George Moore. She stood on the platform watching the receding train. The white steam curled above the few bushes that hid the curve of the line, evaporating in the pale evening. A moment more and the last carriage would pass out of sight, the white gates at the crossing swinging slowly forward to let through the impatient passengers. I heard from several people that read this last year and enjoyed it, that this is a somewhat tragic tale of the fallen woman that is sometimes done in Victorian novels. I'm definitely interested in reading this. George Moore was an Irish author, so that's also neat. And I've heard it's just really well written, and I'm looking forward to getting to this one as well. The only other audiobook besides David Copperfield that I will be attempting is Scenes of Clerical Life by George Eliot. I have kind of a complicated relationship with George Eliot in that her books, Middlemarch, I didn't really love the first time I read it. The second time after reading it, I absolutely adored it. I consider it one of my favorite books now. Daniel Deronda, I loved right away. The Mill on the Floss, I read last year, and it was really a struggle to get through. And now, looking back, it's definitely not a favorite novel of mine. But from how much I love Daniel Deronda and now love Middlemarch, I definitely want to continue reading through all of her books, and she does have a fair number more. But I thought since I have so much on my TBR, I would kind of take it easy with her, and this is a collection of 3 short stories, maybe novellas, because altogether the audiobook is around 14 hours. And I'm looking forward to doing something a little bit different from her. And I haven't really heard from anyone who's read this, but I do, I have decided I want to read all of George Eliot's books, and this is the next one that I will be moving on to. I don't know much about it, except I think it just involves characters who are involved some way in the church, and I'm sure she'll have lots of social commentary throughout, but it will be interesting to experience her books via audiobook. Then a book that was on my 5-star TBR Victober predictions that I'm just now getting to is Beside the Bonnie Briarbush by Ian McLaren. That was a pseudonym for the Reverend John Watson. Kind of ironic that his name was John Watson. And it's written by a Scottish pastor and just his small rural community. So I think it will be really interesting to see this picture of a Victorian Scottish town and maybe how everyone in the town interacts. I'm not sure exactly what to expect, but I'm definitely looking forward to it. And I will report back at the end of the month in a 5-star TBR reactions video on all of the ones that I have gotten to. Then a real treaty read I'm going to be reading is Ghostly Tales. So this says spine-chilling stories of the Victorian age. There are some beautiful illustrations in this book, and this is a group of 7 ghost stories. And the stories are A Whistle and I'll Come to You, My Lad by M.R. James, The Old Nurse's Story by Elizabeth Gaskell, The Signalman by Charles Dickens, The Body Snatcher by Robert Louis Stevenson, The Captain of the Pole Star by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, The Phantom Coach by Amelia B. Edwards, The Screaming Skull by F. Marion Crawford. So these are not all British authors, and some of them are a little bit past the Victorian era, but it's just a really fun October read anyway. So I will, talk about it, the ones that I do get to, and I'm really looking forward to reading some ghost stories in the month of October. Lastly, in this massive TBR, this is a book I will only be starting in the month of October. It's going to be a very long project, and I will be reading Vanity Fair by William Makepeace Thackeray. Like I said, I will only be starting it because I'm going to be reading this through an app called Serial Reader that I heard about from Olive over at A Book Olive. And this is the closest thing you will get now to having a serialized novel sent in newspaper format to you every day. This is an app that delivers it to your device every day, and you can pick the time that you want it delivered. There are 111 installments to Vanity Fair. So I'm really looking forward to getting to it and really taking my time with it. I know there is a new miniseries coming out this year, so I am looking forward to getting to that, and I just can't wait to really take my time with this because I've heard from a lot of people it's very overwhelming and dense. Anyhow, all to say that I want to read Vanity Fair because it is such an iconic Victorian novel. So that is my whopping, unrealistic, idealistic Victober TBR, but these are all books that I'm interested in, so what are you gonna do? It's all books I'll get to eventually anyhow. I hope that you guys enjoyed this. Please let me know what you'll be reading this Victober if you don't have a channel. And if you do have a channel and I haven't commented on your video, you can link that down below. And I look forward to so much Victober fun with everyone. Have a great day, guys.